If you watch the channel, guys, you know I love my 100-400 G Master. Probably my favorite lens of all time, and that's because I use it to shoot everything from nature to wildlife, birds, portraits, sports, everything. I want a lens that can do it all. I like to carry as little as possible and get the best results possible. So I came up with the 100-400. It just works perfect for me, and I think a lot of people, and I can't recommend this lens enough. But sometimes you need just a little bit more reach. And yeah, you can throw it in crop mode. And if you're using something like the A7R4, you got those megapixels, but what if you need even more reach? Well, we have options. We've got something like this, the 1.4x teleconverter from Sony, and there's also a 2x, but we're gonna talk about the 1.4, effectively making this a 560mm full frame equivalent lens. And that's gonna give us the reach that pretty much most people are looking for. But does this little guy degrade the picture quality? Does it degrade your autofocus ability? And does it push your aperture enough to a point where you might as well just go for the big lens? That's what we're going to talk about today. Let's get started. So this little beast right here is the $550 1.4x teleconverter from Sony that effectively gives me reach out to 560mm on my 100-400. It also works on a few other lenses like the 70-200 G Master and your big old expensive primes as well. This for me was a little bit hard to swallow just because, well, you can pretty much buy a lens for the cost of this, but does it actually degrade the picture quality, the autofocus, and does it push the aperture enough to not make it worth it? That's what we're talking about today. And initially, I wanted to buy this lens because it just did a whole bunch of things very well. The minimum focus distance is phenomenal, and I wanted a little bit more sometimes when I'm shooting birds, when you just need that extra reach. Well, I talked myself into getting this thing because you never know when you're gonna need to get that shot. And you know what? It's already come in handy, I gotta say. Sometimes you just need the reach. Sometimes you don't want to crop and have that loss of quality. It's really nice to have. So I gotta say, guys, this thing is not gonna be great for everybody, but let's dive in deep and actually look at what people are claiming that it does. I've heard people saying that the quality is terrible, that it affects the autofocus and the aperture just way too much. You might as well just buy both if you need it. And I'm happy to say that it's just not the case. This thing actually does live up to the price and the hype from Sony, and it does a great job. But don't take my word from it. I'm gonna show you some stuff that I've kind of broken down. I'm gonna show you some tests in real time, some stuff that I've kind of gone through, and it's extensively tested it in bad light, in typical light, in everything in between to kind of show you guys exactly what you can expect out of this thing. A quick look at what the converter comes with reveals a nice little case, and that's it. And really, that's all you need. It does install nicely and quite tight to the back of the lens. It does have a little rubber gasket for confidence when it comes to weather sealing. And it is very low profile, as you can see, not adding a lot of length to the lens. It doesn't weigh much either. Next, let's have a quick look at the focal range and show you the difference that this converter makes. Again, my favorite thing about this lens is just how versatile it is. You can bring it and shoot in a multitude of situations, and you know it's going to be able to perform. And don't forget, you can always throw it into crop mode for some extra reach. Here's what the lens's standard focal range looks like compared to using the teleconverter. Keep in mind that the longer your focal length, the tougher it is to get crisp pictures. Unless you're bumping your ISO way up, you're going to have to compensate with lower shutter speeds, which means you're really going to have to rely on your image stabilization and your shooting skill. All these examples were taken with the teleconverter installed, but now let's have a look at some test shots with and without the converter. Okay, let's get to the big test now. Let's compare the sharpness between the lens and the lens with the converter. Over here at 100mm, we do have a difference in aperture. We've got f4.5 here without the converter, and our maximum aperture is 6.3 with the converter. As far as the center goes, it's going to be pretty much indistinguishable, a fantastic performance, and honestly, probably a little bit better than I expected. If we look into the corners, it's pretty much the same story. I'm very happy to say that the corners are Pretty surprising with this guy. It's pretty much indistinguishable. I'd have to give the advantage maybe just by a few percent to the lens without the converter, but that's to be expected. Overall, super happy with this. And now let's check it out zoomed in all the way into 400. Now looking at 400, our maximum aperture is now f5.6 on the left, and with the converter it's at f8. And obviously this is now where it counts. This is why we get these things, to have that extra reach. So let's look into the center first. And again, I'm happy to say that it's very, very close, indistinguishable if you ask me. Maybe a few percent going toward the lens without the converter, but again, more glass, that's kind of to be expected. But for me, an adequate and absolutely, if not amazing, performance. Let's have a look at the corners. If we look into the corners again, I'm gonna have to say that I'm still quite impressed with the performance here on the lens itself, and with the converter, it's actually pretty darn good. You can see a little bit of softness start to creep in the final, maybe 5% or so, but we're really not concerned with that much shooting wildlife and birds and things like that flying around. We're more concerned with center sharpness. But for me, completely acceptable and really a great performance all around. So a lens is only as good as its autofocus. So how does this stack up with the 1.4x teleconverter? Let's have a look. I'm happy to say that once again, it exceeds expectations. And not just on a single test, but pretty much every test I ran, hitting nearly 100% of shots. And this is handheld with an A7 III, not a crazy A9 or anything. What do you think? What more could you ask for? We've covered focal range, which in my opinion is more than adequate for the majority of photographers. And do keep in mind there's also crop mode, and if that's not enough, Sony does make a 2x teleconverter. As far as sharpness is concerned, you've seen that it shouldn't be an issue, even for you pixel peepers. And autofocus reliability and tracking seems to appear pretty much unaffected. And the one last thing I wanted to reiterate for you is to be aware that this teleconverter will reduce your maximum aperture by 1 stop of light, so you'll have to figure out a way to compensate through shutter speed or ISO. And for me, it's not a big deal at all. Any more than that, it might start to get a bit annoying, but it's worth the trade-off for me to have a smaller and more versatile lens if I'm not going to be birding and shooting way out there all the time. If you are a subscriber, you also know that I like to rate things on a scale from never think about again to consider to definitely buy. And if you are the proud owner of a 100-400 G Master, or 70-200 for that matter, or one of those crazy primes, and you're looking to get a little bit more reach without breaking the bank and going to something ridiculously huge, well, I could definitely recommend this to you. All right, my friends, let's leave it at that. That's my thoughts on this bad boy, the 100-400 and its little companion, the 1.4x teleconverter. I really like it. I think this combo is great for me, and I think it's going to be great for a lot of people just because of the versatility. And, you know, it's not going to take up any room, and it's there when you need it. So that's my thoughts on it. As you can see, it does a great performance, and you're probably not going to tell the difference except for that aperture. You might have to bump up your ISO a little bit, but don't be scared of that because, well, we got awesome cameras these days. So if you like this video, guys, if it helped you out, consider hitting that like and subscribe button as usual. And if you want to pick anything that we've talked about up, if you're ready to buy it, I'll leave affiliate links down in the description for you. Like always, make mistakes, be yourself, and get out of here and take some more pictures. See you next time.